This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and exciting times here. Here's a product that's probably been helped by the 12-inch MacBook because there's a lot of similarities here, but it costs considerably less. This is the $699 Asus Zenbook UX305 13.3-inch Full HD matte display. There's a QHD 3200 by 1800 coming as well. Zenbook design, the usual swirled metal lid, kind of a plum color, a little weird if you ask me, but anyway, all metal body here, very slim, 12.3 millimeters. However, it's got a lot of ports on it, weighs 2.6 pounds, Intel Core M inside, 5th generation, so you're not getting quite the performance. Well, look at it now. So this is the Asus Zenbook UX305. You could call it an Ultrabook. It is 13.3 inches, 2.6 pounds, quite light, obviously compact, but technically Intel came up with the word Ultrabook and they want a touchscreen in there for it to meet that definition. This doesn't have a touchscreen, folks, so if you're looking for a touchscreen, this ain't your animal. What it does have is a really gorgeous looking design. I mean, Asus Zenbooks are always very nice. The spun aluminum lid. This time they've done it up in a kind of, well, plum color. I don't know what else to call it. The interior particularly more deeply plum. They've tried everything. They've had champagne gold. They've even done black lids. They've had silver lids. So, hey, they're trying a new color here. Not super my favorite, but it does kind of remind me of Sony Vaios of old back in the days when they were the purple PC. Anyway, 12.3 millimeters. And Asus has to thank Apple and the new MacBook 12-inch. Who'd ever think you could say that, right? That they'd be thanking Apple. But that's because that beast is going to come in at $1299 starting price. Pretty expensive for an Intel Core M Ultrabook with no ports except for one USB-C port. Here, Asus said, hey, we can fit ports on there. We can't say it's just because it's skinny. Even though it does have the usual wedge-shaped design, it gets thinner at the front end, so that does limit the availability of space for ports and things. But still, we have our SD card slot here, 2 USB 3.0 ports on this side. And here, a third USB port, which is better than the usual Ultrabook, which hovers usually around 2 USB ports. So you got 3 of them here. We have micro HDMI. Obviously, there really is no room for full-size HDMI here. Your usual headphone / mic 3.5 millimeter jack, and of course the power connector there. So if you need a machine that's an all-arounder, you don't want to carry a bunch of dongles, good times here because, well, we got some ports. On the back edge, not too much to see. There are these little rubber feet that stick out. Kind of hard to spot. There they are. And that's one thing I'm not too thrilled about with the design. Once you open up the lid and push it back some, it actually rests on these feet here, which just feels a little bit awkward, but it's not the end of the world. The bottom is held on by a bunch of Torx T5 screws on the corners, and you have to take off the back feet, the rear feet, not the front feet, to find 2 more Phillips head screws if you want to open it up and access the internals. And we'll splice in a picture so you can see what that looks like. Inside you have an M2 slot for the SSD, but that uses the SATA 3 standard. No PCIe SSD, nothing fast there, but it is the usual gumstick shape. It is accessible if you want to do upgrades. However, since the base model here in the US is $699 and you get a 256 gig SSD along with 8 gigs of RAM, I think a lot of people will be happy with that capacity. 8 gigs of RAM is soldered on board. There is no RAM slot. The Intel Wi-Fi card that also handles Bluetooth is socketed as well as per usual, and that's the Intel 7265, and that's AC, wireless. You can see it shows fingerprints. This is aluminum. It's a matte finish, which is good, so it won't be too slippery, but we just cleaned it before we started filming, and it's already gotten a little slippery looking. Speakers over here on the bottom side, that's where it fires from. Bang & Olufsen ICE audio. You'll hear the speakers. Asus generally doesn't do particularly loud or full audio. This is no exception, but for the price point, how much can we expect, right? Open it up and that plum color, well, it really blossoms everywhere. Notice the bezel. This is almost a dead ringer for the 13-inch MacBook Air. Asus is not hiding their derivativeness here exactly. That's okay though. Full-size keyboard here, 1.2 millimeter travel, so a little on the short side, but Ultrabooks often are. The keyboard is sunk down, so there's even less room for key travel. It's not bad at all. I actually like the keyboard quite well. The lack of backlighting is a little bit difficult to get used to once you've had one with backlighting, but other than that, Roomy trackpad here uses, this is the Microsoft Signature Edition model, so it doesn't have a whole lot of added software on there. There are some Asus utilities, but other than Asus gestures for handling 3-finger gestures, 2-finger gestures, there's not much going on. It's an okay trackpad. It's not super duper great. It's really, really loud and clicky. That part I'm not too thrilled with. And it's stiff enough that if you're one of those people that likes to use the clicker instead of tapping to click, your finger will tend to slide on the trackpad a little bit when you do that, given the amount of effort that it's taken. But it's not hideous, it's not jumpy, it's not unpredictable, it gets the job done. Perfectly normal keyboard layout. With Asus, they always like to put the power button here up in this corner, so it's not the delete key. Be careful, unless you want to put the machine to sleep every time you're trying to delete something. Moving up to look at the display here. You can see how little glare there is, but this is a truly matte display. It's not just kind of like a glare, anti-glare coating that's not very effective. It's very matte. It's also quite bright. It is 292 nits of brightness. For a budget machine, that's not bad. And this is IPS, so as we go off angle, viewing angles and the colors stay quite good. And you can tip it forward, you can tip it backward, and it's not going to do that kind of color shifty thing at all. Nice looking, right? Very nice. Again, not a touchscreen, so for those of you who are hoping for a touchscreen model, this one is not for you. In terms of color gamut, it's not too bad. It's 92% of sRGB. Your $1,000 Ultrabook is typically 95 to 99% of sRGB, so that's pretty close considering the cheaper price here. Delta E, the colors are cool by default. Now, people are used to that on laptops. They often are. And sometimes I think it's done, in particular I've noticed with the Asus, because they have some models that are fairly well calibrated from the factory and some that are pretty off. And what they're doing there is they're using a panel that's slightly less awesome in quality. And when they run it at a very cool temperature, it looks quite bright. It looks brighter even than it is. And if you calibrate this guy down, it will look a little bit dimmer. Again, this will be available with a QHD 3200 by 1800 display as well, probably a Samsung panel. That will be out in April, and that will move up the price to $999. And for comparison's sake, here it is next to the 13-inch MacBook Air. Quite similar in design and quite similar in size. Going to get a little bit more performance out of the MacBook Air because it has a higher wattage Core i5 CPU. Also, you can get it with a Core i7 CPU. This is the Intel Core M, 5th generation Broadwell. We'll go into that again in a minute. And what they look like close. Pretty similar. And stack them up. Two thin wedges. MacBook Air looks skinnier because they do curve it so it gets a little thicker in the center versus on the edge. And here it is next to the 2015 Dell XPS 13, a 13.3-inch Ultrabook that is the size of an 11.6-inch more like. So the Dell starts at $799, and there you get a Core i3, 4 gigs of RAM, and 128 gig SSD. So you're getting a Core i3 versus the Core M for $100 more, $899. You can get it with the Core i5. So $100 to $200 cheaper. You do get more storage here. You do get more RAM. You do get less horsepower and performance, and we'll talk about that when we get to the benchmark numbers. So let's talk about performance. That could be the bugaboo here, since this is the Intel Broadwell 5th generation Core M CPU. Not the first time we've seen it. That is used in the Lenovo Yoga 3 Pro, which is considerably more expensive. That one is also a 2-in-1 with rotating display, does a 360, all that sort of thing. The 12-inch MacBook will have a Core M, though clocked higher than this one. It is sort of like the 4th generation Haswell Y series CPU, designed primarily for really super thin small devices and particularly tablets. So Asus said, hey, let's throw it in a 13-inch laptop and see if it sticks. And that's what they did here. Nice thing is this is fanless. Core M doesn't really need a fan, though. Lenovo put one in the Yoga 3 Pro. And does that mean it gets hot? It doesn't get burning hot, but if you are doing something like encoding video, exporting video, playing 3D games, which this is really not designed for particularly, right in this area right here, this is where the heat will be facing up top primarily, so not against your lap anyway, so that part is nice. Anyway, around 20% slower than an Intel Core i5 Haswell or Broadwell, since Haswell and Broadwell generations benchmark about the same. Right here we have the SSD speed, which is pretty much par for the course. Nothing too wildly fast there, but honestly SSDs are so fast that even if you're not looking at the fastest PCIe, you're not going to say, oh my god, I'm just waiting for storage to happen there. PC Mark 7, it scored 4198, where a Core i5 would score around 5,000. PC Mark 8 Home, 2252. W Prime it computed Pi in 29.3 seconds. This is where it gets interesting, because where you're going to notice the difference isn't in something where PC Mark benchmarks really favor fast SSD storage. When you're doing W Prime, you're really looking at CPU power. So 29.3 seconds compared to your average Core i5 Ultrabook, which is 18.8 seconds to compute Pi. So it takes longer. And the Intel Atom Bay Trail quad cores do it in 31.3 seconds. So the number is actually closer to an Intel Atom here for computational speed. Geekbench 3, the 64-bit test, since this is running full Windows 8.1 64-bit. Single core 2122, multi-core 3594. It's interesting that the multi-core test is not that high. Usually it's about, well, no kidding, 2 cores, twice the speed of the single core test. Not here. We ran it a bazillion times. Could not get it to go any quicker. So for your average Core i5, that score would be 3,000 and 6,000. Does that mean this is a sluggish machine? No, it's not a sluggish machine. Actually, it feels a little zippier than the Lenovo Yoga 3 Pro running the same CPU, which is interesting enough. And let's take a look at our review of the MacBook Pro 13-inch with Retina display, the one that just came out, the 2015 edition, so we can hear the speakers and see how it handles video playback. And let's do that with a couple of tabs running at the same time, and let's actually go to YouTube to do it this time so we can put some more weight on it. Okie dokie, so we have 5 tabs running here in IE, which tends to be a little bit better at memory management than Chrome. You could do this with Chrome too. We've got our home page, we've got our review page up here, we've got the New York Times, and we have YouTube. So we've got several going at the same time. We'll go up to full HD to match the display resolution. Volume is at 70%, by the way.
This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and here it is, the early 2015
thin, distorted, sort of already.
Retina display. This is the one Broadwell inside. Interestingly, it's also one of the first with the 28-watt CPU, so this is more powerful than Ultrabook CPU, which has been, well, what Apple's been doing with their Pro line for the 13 inches. A lot more brains in here than the MacBook Air.
So switching through all those, it's not lagging.
Windows Ultrabooks running on the 15-watt Intel CPU, and this is what it looks like here, just like the last generation.
So there you have it. It's capable enough certainly to handle a browser with many tabs open, including YouTube playing. The speakers do sound pretty darn quiet and tinny. Now Asus does have some software that could potentially help audio quality. However, it doesn't really make much of a difference. It's called Smart Audio. It's pretty enough looking here. We've got a bunch of EQs and all that sort of thing. We tried all the different presets on here. Nothing really helped it sound much better. But hey, for $6.99, you can use external speakers with a headphone jack, right? So how about battery life? It has a 45 watt-hour battery. That's not uncommon size for a 13-inch Ultrabook, even one with a Core i5 or Core i7 CPU in there. Asus claims up to 10 hours of use time, and they're not too far off here. This Core M is actually doing a better job of power saving than we've seen on some previous models. And in a mix of wireless web use, Microsoft Office, social networking, editing a few raw files in Photoshop, streaming a 45-minute TV show on Netflix, we actually averaged 9.5 hours. So by Windows laptop standards, that's pretty darn good. The laptop comes with the usual Asus square 45-watt charger here with the skinny cord, not terribly long, so you're going to have to be fairly close to an outlet or use an extension cord when you plug it in. Now we're going to plug it in right now so we can test out gaming on this. This has Intel HD 5300 integrated graphics. The CPU is the Intel Core M-5Y10. That's the only CPU option here, and this guy is clocked at 800 megahertz. Boy, it's been a while since we got to talk in megahertz instead of gigahertz, even for smartphones, right? But it does have turbo boost to 2 gigahertz. And therein lies the rub here. This can idle at very low power. It's 4.5 watts, but it can ramp up when it needs to, so it doesn't seem sluggish. And there's not a lot of thermal throttling going on here, so it actually can sustain turbo boost for a decent amount of time. That's why it doesn't seem so laggy, despite the low clock speed. So we're going to test out Skyrim. We're being pretty ambitious here because, you know, integrated graphics on a Core M CPU, even, you know, if we're talking regular Core i5 with HD 5500 graphics, you're going to be playing Skyrim at pretty low settings and resolutions. So we have it at 1366 by 768. You can see anti-aliasing, of course, is off. Anisotropic filtering is off. And let's look at our advanced. Pretty much we got everything at low here. No decal quality. In fact, we're going to drop texture quality from medium to low too, because I've already tried this, not surprisingly, and at those settings with medium quality, we were seeing about 22, 23 frames per second, which just ain't all that. And we've got Fraps running, so you can see the frame rate. Now, at these low settings, the game kind of looks like something, well, from 8 years ago. I don't know. It's not super pretty, right? But it is borderline playable. Not so much, really, though. Things don't look too sharp. And that's not the fault of the display. It's pretty enough. It's just we're not really rendering very high quality stuff here. But if you're running around in a corridor in the dark, you can get above 30 frames per second, which is, well, not really that great. So a gaming laptop, no kidding, it's not. It's $699. Even $1,000 Ultrabooks are not really the sharpest knives in the drawer with their integrated graphics for playing games. Whereas Skyrim is playable at these settings on a Core i5, I don't really call this playable given how low the quality settings are, and the frame rates are pretty too. Other than that, it's really a stupendous buy for the money. 8 gigs of RAM and 256 SSD to grow into. If you're not doing things like compiling tens of thousands of lines of code, exporting 1080p video day in, day out, you know, the heavy demanding tasks, this wouldn't be the machine for that. But web browsing, playing Metro games, those are fine, the live tile games. Word processing, Excel with normal requirements, not you accountants who have spreadsheets that are 100,000 rows and you want to calculate on those. You get the idea. Every day, what most people do on a laptop, this thing is pretty darn awesome. So that's the Asus Zenbook UX305. It's available now. Again, it is $699 for the 1080p version. No touchscreen, like I said. 8 gigs of RAM, 256 gig SSD, and there will be one with a 3200 by 1800 display. That one's going to be $999 out in April of 2015. If you don't need a huge amount of processing power, but you don't want to give up a good design, lovely looks, a metal casing, a good keyboard, all that sort of stuff, well, Asus really has hit a home run here. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to visit our website for the full written review and hit that like button.